Hello and welcome to this week's podcast, The Pocket Stylist. I'm Lisa Talbot and today I am joined by a guest. So, Emma Reilly is an award-winning LGBT veteran, but I'm going to let her tell you more about herself and then we're going to dig into so much more with regards to style and fashion, but also about authenticity and identity. So before we go anywhere, Emma, it's lovely to have you on my podcast. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for asking me. That's really, really great to have a conversation with you.
Oh, it's brilliant. And I met you at Dame Kelly's Athena Effect events. Well, I
Mhm.
don't actually think we met, did we? Because you were on the panel and
Yes.
then you and I connected afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's how it was. Yeah, I was on the panel, which was high, not profile. I've already forgotten the word. Um, High impact, no, high risk.
One of them.
One of
I
them,
can't
something
remember
like that.
what panel you were actually on, but there was kind of four of you, wasn't there? And it was just such a great panel, and it told your story. And I think I probably sat there with my mouth open for a lot of it while so did the rest of the audience. So just tell everybody who's listening now a little bit about you and so they can kind of understand who you are and your background because I think you're a bit of a force to be reckoned with. So and then we'll get into the bit about the clothes and the style and the fashion.
Sure. Okay. Well, my current working life is I'm a program and operations manager for RX, which is a global exhibition company. And we run mostly face-to-face exhibitions and mostly business to business. And it covers 41 different sort of areas, everything from, I don't know, aircraft interiors to the London Book Fair. And we also do some sort of pop events like MCM Comic Con and so New York Comic Con, that kind of stuff as well. So it's quite a breadth of exhibition types. And we've got, I think it's 20 odd countries that we have a presence in and run over 400 shows a year. So it's a big company, lots of diverse stuff going on. Now, my role as that privacy and operations is in the global privacy office. And so my responsibilities are things like I run projects and programs that are making sure we're complying with legislation worldwide for privacy. And the operations part of it is I run a team in the Philippines who ensure that when we're onboarding vendors, we're doing it in the correct way, making sure we have the right assessments for privacy, security, trade sanctions checks, all of that kind of stuff. And another part of my team deals with rights requests for the whole of RX. So that's where anybody has the right to ask for their data to be corrected, deleted, or simply access their
Yeah.
data. That's all done by my team. Outside of that, I have a wife and two kids, a dog, and I'm the assistant director of an a cappella choir called Vocal Dimension, and I sing in a quartet with my wife as well. So quite varied.
Yeah, yeah. I saw you though. I think you flashed up on my Instagram actually singing, and
Yeah.
there was four of you singing. It was just fantastic. Because obviously you and I have had a little bit of a conversation before we've recorded this. But can I take you back to, and this was your story when you were on the panel. Can I take you back to 1993?
Mhm.
And I know that's kind of a long time ago, but can I take you back to then and can we kind of start your story there, please?
So I didn't always want to be working in privacy. Let's start
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
When I was at school, I decided that what I wanted to do was serve in the military, specifically the Royal Navy. So I'd applied, I'd done my GCSEs, I was doing my A levels to give myself a little bit of time, but basically I joined up in July of 1990 to serve in the Royal Navy, or the Wrens as it was at that
yeah,
point. Um, I was in the last class of women to be trained separately from the men. I then volunteered to go to sea because it was just at the point where women were starting to be allowed to go to sea. And then did my secondary training as a radio operator in that sea space. And then my first draft was to a frigate that was going out to the West Indies. So, all the things that you
yeah.
think about when you think about the Royal Navy, it was exciting, it was interesting work. The places that I was going to see were incredible. I was really lucky as far as that was concerned. There was a slight problem though. When I was a kid, I'd sort of started feeling that maybe I might be gay, but I had no relationships. I had no confirmation. I wasn't sure,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah,
And at the time, it was actually illegal to be gay and serve in the military. If you were found out, then they would basically dismiss you. Um, Now, what happened with me is that 1990, I didn't really know who I was. I was barely 18 when I joined, but give it a few more years, come up to the age of 21 in 1993,
yeah,
and I was much more sure about my own sexuality. And also, I was under a lot of stress because I was having to hide this from everybody
yeah,
because it was this rule in place, this
yeah,
ban
yeah,
in place for people. Added to that, my father was extremely ill that year with heart issues. He had to have a quadruple heart bypass, and so all these things
yeah, yeah,
combined together to put me in quite a fragile mental state. Anyway, I went out one evening in like late August or early September, I think it was, with my roommate, who I thought was my friend, had a few drinks, and I said, as part of that evening, to this woman, I think I might be gay. And at that moment, she was really supportive. Like she was didn't care. It was like it's fine with me. Blah blah blah. However, the next morning, I got a knock on the door saying, "Get up, get dressed, get downstairs. You're under arrest." And what the person had done, which was technically correct, is that she'd reported me to the military police for having said that. And so I then underwent some hours of interrogation, taped recorded interviews, like a police interview. They took me to my room and they searched through all my belongings. They confiscated letters and some quite random things to prove that I was gay.
yeah, yeah.
Um, they sent me home to tell my parents what was happening, which was a pretty horrific conversation. Now, the moment I told them, it's sort of burned on my memory. It's like one of those core
Mm-hmm.
memories that you can't
Yeah,
change. I remember where I was, where they were sitting, the room, everything. And when I finally told them what the problem was, after apparently about 6 hours crying and not being able to get it out, I was extremely lucky that they were supportive and they were behind me and said, basically, you come home if you need to. You can be with us again, which, having spoken to many people since then, was not the experience of
many.
most, I
Yeah,
would say, actually. Um, then I had to go back up, spend some weeks on the base. Everybody knows what's happening. So they moved me out of the room with this person, but I'm still living in the same block. I'm not working with her directly, but I'm still eating in the same mess. Everybody knows what's going on. So it was a really isolating time, a really terrifying time. Eventually, it gets to the point where they call you up to captain's table, and I get told you are discharged. Sure, your services are no longer required. 48 hours to leave the base. My parents came and picked me up, and that was it. The door slams on your life, and you
it's
have to redraw
it's.
everything.
I was going to say it's shocking because listening to your story, you were only, and the word is only, you
Mm,
were only 21.
yeah.
You know, you had the world at your feet, but not
Mm,
only that, from your perspective, it must have been really hard to kind of go, well, to treat somebody that way
mm,
is just awful. A human being you're treating
mm.
that way. And but what I find absolutely inspiring about your story, you put your plans into place to make a difference. And I think that's where we can pick the story up again now, can't we? Because, oh boy, did you make a difference.
Well, you at that moment when the door closes on your back, you lose everything because the military is not just a job. It's your job, it's your social life, your friends, basically your family to a degree,
Yeah.
your purpose in life, and it's a big part of your identity. So all of that is immediately gone, and you have to work out what in the heck you're going to do for the rest of your life.
Hmm.
Hence me not knowing I'm going to end up in privacy or project
Yeah,
management
yeah,
at
yeah.
this point, right? But so what I did is I went home. I spent, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks in my old room at my parents' house, just recovering a little bit, if you like.
Yeah.
But then you have to do something. You have to get up and go and work and do something. So I ended up looking at my skills that I had from the Royal Navy and going, well, shooting an SA-80 gun is not that useful in the civilian thing. Morse code, also not that useful, but they taught me how to type. So
Ah.
I went to a temp agency, I did my typing test and started just doing temp work and eventually worked my way up into a career of some description. Now, that was 1993 that I got thrown out. So fast forward to the back end of 1997, and there were a few rumblings that people were trying to get the law overturned. But I didn't really know much about that at the time. Instead, what I did is that I felt really strongly that this was not the right thing. It should not be something you should be thrown out for.
Mhm.
I was a celibate person. I wasn't having relationships. And frankly, plenty of women and men were doing exactly that. They were
Yeah.
having relationships, let's put it
Yeah.
that way. So it seemed completely illogical that I should be punished for something that I wasn't even doing. And people were just going ahead and getting away, that sort of thing. And the argument is that you were a security risk because you could be blackmailed. Well, if the rule wasn't there, there wouldn't be anything to blackmail you with, right?
Yeah.
So it all just felt really unfair. So at the end of 97, I got to a point where I had a girlfriend that I was moving in with for the first time. I had a good solid beginnings of a career that was going somewhere in IT support at the time. So I felt sort of solid enough in myself to be able to challenge it. I
Mhm.
phoned up Stonewall, and basically I can't thank the person enough that I spoke to, because whoever it was knew about what was going on with other cases and said, if you want to take this to court or try and challenge it, go and speak to this solicitor. And so I called Stephen Gross at Bindman and Partners, and he was taking certainly one other case, and I think two others in addition to the UK court, looking at that whole thing. So I spoke to him, and he said, well, the first thing that you need to do is challenge it through the UK courts. So it was me against the Ministry of Defence.
Wow.
And
Just you against the Ministry of Defence, which is why
yeah,
I
yeah.
said you're quite a powerful person, the fire in your belly.
Well, it wasn't successful in the end. It basically, what we were trying to argue is that it was sexual discrimination, and there was another case to do with Southwest Trains that gave a precedent, which then blew that possibility out of the water. But I did go up to the courts in London, and there was me and my barrister, and then on the other side of the room there were three Queen's Counsels, as it were, then for the Ministry of Defence. So they were very virulent in trying to make sure that this whole thing was not going to lift. Therefore, it didn't work in the UK. So there was only one option, basically. So he suggested, and I said yes, to take my case to the European Court of Human Rights. So where it was me against the mod, it was now me against the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
And the case law is still there, up on there. If you want to just search the case law on the, I think they call it HUDOC, basically the repository for all of it. It's R versus the United Kingdom. And I decided to go anonymous, so R rather than Emma Reilly, because I didn't want my parents to have to go through anything
Yeah.
extra, or my girlfriend at the time. And to be fair, that's probably the one regret I have about it. I kind of wish my name was up there now. At the time, it was the right decision,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah. So my case then goes into this process through the European Court of Human Rights, and that was beginning in 1998. Now, there were 4 headline cases going through, supported by the Rank Outsiders group called the Legal Action Group, I think it was named. And so they were taking 4 very clear, very clean cases through as the headline ones to try and challenge the law. But my case and the other people who are sort of independents or supported behind them were all lending weight to that question of, should this law still be in place in UK military law? And at the end of 1999, September 27th, 1999, the European Court ruled that on those 4 cases that the law, the ban was illegal in the United Kingdom. And so the government at the time, who's Labour, were forced to lift the ban in January of 2000. So I will just be really clear, it was forced. Nobody in the government or the Ministry of Defence wanted to lift this ban. They were putting a lot of money, effort, time into proving why they should keep this ban in place. Hilariously, though, 6 months after the ban lifted, they did a piece of work to do a survey because they fully expected recruiting levels to go down and a whole bunch of people to resign and go. Neither of those two things happened. You lost a few old guard commanders, etc., but basically nobody else cared. Everything just carried on as it was before. So it was all ridiculous.
I was going to say though, that must have been a massive kind of achievement for you though, because I think this goes right the way back, go back to when you were 21 and you had your whole kind of life and career planned out for you in your head, and
Mm,
it all got turned on its head because of a rule.
mm,
And many would have walked away and gone, okay, that's the rule, that's a bit rubbish, and kind of what do I do now? Whereas you sat with it and went, no, do you know what? This isn't right. And for me,
mm,
that goes back so much. We say about people being authentic.
mm,
That is literally you saying, no, no, no. Everybody deserves the right to be authentic in every way, shape or form that you
mm.
choose to do it. So that picked up that kind of authenticity piece. Do you think that then threw out different opportunities for you? Because I know
Mhm.
you've gone on to do some other major stuff as well. Do you think that was a bit of the start of people going, wow, we really need to listen to Emma?
Honestly, absolutely not. I
Oh, really?
not in the initial days. When
Okay.
that judgment came out,
Yeah.
for my case, which took another 2 years to get to the end of it because of, you know, all of the administrative stuff that goes on with these things. I basically just packed the whole lot away, all my documents, and put it in the loft and forget about it.
Okay.
But I didn't talk about it at all. It was
Ah,
only, I'd say, probably about 10 years ago now. I was going through a period of change in my life. So my marriage was breaking down. I was beginning a new relationship. So there was a lot of stuff going on as
yeah,
far
yeah.
as that was concerned. And I'd started to talk about it a little bit. The real catalyst was two things. One was moving in with my partner, my now wife. Her daughter asked me when I now talked to them about it, asked me to give a talk at her school in front of assembly.
Oh, wow.
I know it was one of the most terrifying things I've ever done in my life.
Because
If you,
because children of that certain age, they're blank, aren't they? And you're
oh,
and you're like
absolutely.
and you're like, please give me something back. But I think they were
No,
probably listening intently.
I can
However,
guarantee it.
their
Yeah.
facial expressions just don't say anything,
No, they're
do
too
they?
too cool to say anything like
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah.
No, and I know it for a fact because I did this, and then I can't remember if it was 3 weeks or 3 months later. You do this, and there's nothing, and they're sort of looking at like you're a piece of leftover sausage. That's about as interested as they looking. But then 3 weeks or 3 months later, we met one of the mums of one of the kids in a car park somewhere, and she said, "Oh, you know what? My kid came home that day and said that was the most amazing assembly they've ever been to." And you just think,
Yeah.
show it on your faces,
Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah.
You'll never know. So as I figured that as long as if you can get through that experience talking to a
Yeah.
bunch of hormonal teenagers from
Yeah.
11 to 17, then pretty much you can talk to almost any audience, I think. So
Mm.
that was one pivotal moment. The other one was a professor called I'm going to forget his name now. Paul Johnson. There we go.
Yeah, yeah.
Professor Paul Johnson. He decided he wanted to put together a book about cases that were taken to the European Court in Strasbourg. And it was all about sex or gender or sexuality discrimination cases. And so there was chapters for various things. One chapter was about the military and cases that had gone in that section. So he basically had researched all the cases that had gone through there, and he had found another chap who'd gone through with my solicitor and seen my contact details in that because it was part, and so he
Yeah,
knew
yeah.
who I was. But of course, I'd elected to go anonymous. So he had this big ethical drama as to whether to actually contact me or not. He eventually decided to contact me. And so I told him my story. And I remember it really clearly because it was the first time that I sort of sat down with somebody for this oral history and just talked him through from start to finish everything that had happened and what had gone on and what I'd done and so on and so forth. And it was a real change at that point. And it was amazing to see. He sort of took that oral recording and put it in the book. And the book got published, and I think it was 2016. And so from that, things then started happening from these two bits and pieces. So then I started getting contacted for other things. And eventually I ended up like I was on so in 2017, the BBC did a program called it was something to do with 50 years of LGBT Britain, because it was 50 years since the Wolfenden Report and the law had changed. And of course, at
Yeah.
that time, it would have been 50 years since the rule had been written into the military about homosexuals. And so they recorded me as part of that. And so then other things started to happen. I started to get asked about it, like on the 20th anniversary, I got asked to go onto the BBC Breakfast and be interviewed.
Yeah.
And amazingly, the person who was interviewed along with me was Craig Jones. And we ended up talking in the green room beforehand, working out that not only were we the same service, but he had also been an officer on my ship when I'd been on the ship.
Oh my
And
goodness.
it was so bizarre. He remembered me. I, to be truthful, didn't remember him. But he was starting just at that time, he was starting Fighting with Pride, which is the charity organization that basically 20 years on after the ban had been lifted, recognized that nothing had been done for LGBT veterans having been thrown out. And my story, although perhaps shocking to you, is extremely mild in comparison with many, if not most, of the stories of LGBT veterans who have been discharged or damaged under that ban. It's having spoken to him and doing what I do now, which we'll come to. I see some incredibly horrific stories that are all wrapped up in this illegal ban that was in there. He decided he was going to try and do something for them. So he started this charity along with Caroline Page, and they, between them and with other help, basically challenged the government to say, why haven't you done something for these veterans? Which eventually led to a review, of independent review run by Lord Etherton. And from that became 49 recommendations for reparation for LGBT veterans, some of which are financial, some of which are non-financial, including restoration of berets and apologies. An apology from the Prime Minister was number one on the list, which happened in 2023. And there's a lot now that's happened for LGBT veterans going forward, including the creation and installation of a memorial in the National Arboretum, which I was privileged to sing at with my quartet. So worlds colliding in that moment, I can tell
Yeah,
you.
but you know, even as I listen to your story kind of again,
Mm,
what's really interesting is you first of all had to be vulnerable when you first
mm,
went out and did it, because like you said, you'd never really spoken about it. But
mm,
interestingly, by you being that vulnerable and showing your vulnerability, probably others felt they could go, oh, do you know what, that happened to me? And then it's amazing when you've got the other gentleman that you met on the BBC breakfast and then suddenly I think what it does is it challenges, there's not many that would challenge something. And
mm,
do you know what I mean? Lots of people will say, oh, that's not right.
mm.
But
I know what you
to
mean.
go into it like you have together with your colleagues and gone, no, 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 do you know what? There's more to this. Bit like you just said about the berets and the
Mm,
financial
mm,
reparations. It's like sometimes we should challenge and we should we should be brave enough to challenge because many would go, okay, it's going on, but do nothing. And I think that's
Yeah.
where, when I listened to your story, it was a bit like, no, no, no. Do you know what? Because you're not very tall, are you, in stature? Do you know
No.
what I mean? But you're this powerful woman that went, no, do you know what? You're wrong. And it is wrong. And you challenged it on a bigger scale. And then you've gone on to
Mm.
do more.
Mm. Well, what I've been reflecting, because now I'm working for the Ministry of Defence on the impact panel for the financial recognition, and I'm seeing all of these stories, and what is making itself really clear, certainly as far as this particular story is concerned, it seems to always be traumatized individuals who are standing up to make changes. It's less so allies can come along and will support, but it's always traumatized individuals who first challenged the law in the first place in the 90s. And then when that was done, we all sort of stopped and breathed or hid or licked our wounds, or in my case, just tried to forget about it and actually build some kind of career in life. Uh, and then that sort of responsibility bone, that feeling that nobody should be left behind, gets resurrected by somebody
Hmm.
like Craig and Caroline and so forth. Um, and again, it's traumatized people that are coming in to sort of say, yes, you're right, this was not right. I will put my story, that vulnerability out there to show, first of all, the independent review, this is what happened. This is what really happened.
Yeah, yeah.
Not the glossy highlights that the Ministry of Defence potentially would have wanted to just keep with, but actually the downright disgusting, damaging stuff that they did to people in the name of this illegal ban. And just to, trigger warning, if anybody's listening to this and is potentially going to be concerned about the sort of things I'm going to be saying, please do sort of switch off for 5 minutes. But basically, when we're looking at impact, we're looking at how that person was impacted when they served under the ban. And that can be as simple as they couldn't be themselves. And so they decided they were going to leave of their own accord. So they served 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it might be. They might have heard a bit of name calling, quite
Hmm.
light sort of stuff. And then they go. That's kind of almost baseline. It's still pretty horrible because you can't be yourself. You can't put 100% into your job or your friends or your life. You're constantly having to hide some aspect of yourself. But it can also run all the way up to really horrific physical abuse, multiple rapes, gang rapes, imprisonment of various types and sources, constructive dismissals, like not being able to continue your service just because they think you might be gay, and also really horrible things like being asked or being forced to be bait to find other people, putting people in a situation, already vulnerable situation, in more vulnerable situations so that they're exposed to these kind of things. The interrogations were horrific. They would get to the point where either they've beaten you down to the point where you've admitted that you're gay, and once they get to that point, they don't stop and say, right, you're gay, that's it, you're out the door. No, they continue on and they ask question after question about intimate sexual detail. Who does what, with whom, when, with
Yeah,
what
yeah.
implements? I mean, it's really degrading to say the least. Um, so
Which is why you felt that the need to challenge it for so many different
yes,
reasons, because
yeah.
it's not just, and that's why I think it's your story is unbelievable because it's not just you went to the Navy and you got kicked out. There's so much more to this. Can
Mm,
I ask you a clothing question? Because this is
sure.
another thing, just changing the direction for it a little bit.
Yeah, yeah,
When you were in, obviously you did the Navy, and when you went into the Navy, you would have had your own kind of style and things like that. And
yeah.
then you obviously went to a uniform
Mm,
7 days a week, 6 days a week, however
basically.
many.
Yeah.
When you then came out, did you find it quite hard to kind of go, oh, now what do I wear? Did it cause more challenges? Because although you've worn up, I suppose what I'm trying to say is when you wear a uniform all day, every day, you don't really have to overthink it. So when
Yes.
you came out and you were then thinking, what am I going to do? Whether you did the typing course or whatever you did
Yeah,
you then
yeah.
suddenly think, oh no, now I need a different wardrobe to do
Effectively.
two different things?
Yeah, and that's very much stayed with me. So when if you're used to being in a uniform service, as you say, you don't have to think about it.
Hmm.
What you're going to wear, in what situation, you just pull it out the wardrobe and make sure it's nice and shiny and very clean and ironed, right? So, this has definitely carried all the way through, and it actually came to a really clear realization about it when COVID hit. And the reason I say that is because I hadn't really thought about what I wore as a wardrobe as a sort of existential question, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
when COVID hit, obviously I have to start working online. And I used to go into my office 4 days a week. I used to work at home 1 day a week. Didn't really make that much difference. I always went into the office in office wear. Didn't think about it. Just thought that was the thing that you do. But
You
and
almost
even
created your own uniform to go into the
right,
office.
exactly. So I'd always dressed for the office. I find it incredibly difficult to go into the office in a casual manner. If it was dress down Friday, about the closest I'd come would be I'd wear jeans instead of sort of office trousers.
Yeah,
I'd still wear a shirt and whatever. So I'd be like half office and half casual. That was my attempt. But what brought it into a real realization that I'm sort of programmed, if you like, or I've trapped myself in this, is that at COVID, at home, you can wear what you like, and everybody's, doing their whole days in jogging clothes and t-shirts and whatever. And when I started doing, I thought, yeah, I'll do this. I'll get in my jogging clothes and do my work, and I felt so uncomfortable. I
oh,
I couldn't do it. And so nowadays, I actually do dress for work, even when I'm today. I've got a normal pair of office trousers on and a normal shirt because I'm at work.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I have to, I need that mental separation between home life and work life. I find it's from a mental perspective, being able to put on that uniform, if you like. And I've branched out the colors and things that I wear now. I'm
yeah,
much more
yeah,
bolder as far as pattern and colors and things that I do now than I was 10, 15 years ago, let alone, when I first got thrown out. But it's still that I put on the uniform
mm,
to work. And then when I go home, even if it's like 10 seconds down the garden to go back into the house, I will take all of this off and I'll be in comfy clothes or lounging
yeah, yeah,
clothes. Or I'll put a pair of jeans on and go out for whatever I'm doing in the evening. So it's sort of a very much a mental segregation
yeah.
between work and play or relaxing.
Yeah, and I love that. And it is when COVID happened, you
Mm.
are so right. Everybody then obviously worked from home. Everybody changed their attire, and a
Mhm.
lot of ladies, especially, they went jeans on the bottom half, especially if they were on Zoom. So they did jeans on the bottom half, maybe a top, a knit
Yeah,
or a shirt or something on the top.
yeah, yeah.
And then what happened is when obviously the employers were trying to get the women, especially, back into
Mhm.
work and the men, it was very much like just come in. We don't really care what you wear, just
Yeah,
come in. So at that time, the men and the ladies were like, okay, this is great. I'll come back into the office and I'll wear what I've been wearing at
yeah.
home
Mm.
because that's what I've kind of got used to. But what's really interesting, there's been a flip again. In that, I'd say the
Mm.
past 2 years, I've worked with
Mm.
more ladies who are like, I'm in real trouble now, Lisa, because now I only wear casual to work, and now I don't feel like I'm going to work. So now I
Right.
need to change it, but I don't know how to change it because I've been completely casual in that way. So and the same thing, men can kind of get away with it because they do trousers, shirts, and a blazer or
Yeah,
whatever. But
yeah.
honestly, women were like, I don't wear a heel anymore. I'm constantly in trainers. So they'd lost that way to dress and they had to flip it back.
To
And
be
it
fair though, I've never worn a heel except for special occasions, and I mean really special occasions. And when we're talking here, we're talking about that much if I have to. So the idea. I think it's good in the sense that it's flipped back to being a little bit more structured when it
Yeah,
comes to
yeah,
work. But I do think there's a mental difference between wearing something that's structured and not wearing something structured when you're talking about a work environment. However, I do definitely dispute the idea that any woman or any man, frankly, would need to go in high heels to be able to be part of that sort of
agree.
uh, uh, work environment,
Hmm.
because it's not actually about the height of your heels.
It's
It's
about how
actually
you do the
just about
job.
how you feel,
Yeah.
and so how you can do your job.
Yeah, but what I found as well, ladies were saying to me that they wear some of their clothing, and I don't always agree with this, as a bit of an armor. So
Oh,
if
no, I
I've
do agree with
got,
that.
yeah, my some of my CEO ladies or ladies who have gone into a board meeting,
Mm,
they'll say, right, I need to wear something that I feel not only works for me, so you're the style identity,
yeah,
but it also makes me feel powerful. Because I always say there is nothing better than a woman who feels like herself because she'll already feel powerful anyway and confident. But some ladies say, I just feel, and where heels are concerned, listen, I don't wear heels either because I would never be able to march as fast as I could march in a heel. Um, and they say, but a heel just makes me feel like I'm powerful. So it's, but again, it goes back to identity. But I totally
oh
agree
yeah.
with you. You should be able to wear what you feel comfortable in
Mm,
that represents you. It, you know, it supports the business that you're in or the
yeah,
brand that you're working for, but you should never ever deviate to be somebody in a role that you think somebody else thinks you should dress like.
yeah. Well, look, you and I met, or sort of met, at the
Yeah,
theatre,
yeah, yeah.
Kelly Holmes, right? Both my wife and I were there, and we both spent quite a lot of time working out what we were going to
We're
wear.
gonna wear.
Partly for me specifically, being on the panel, I wanted to make sure that I represented myself,
Yep.
but perhaps in a slightly elevated way, if that makes
Yeah, yeah,
sense.
yeah.
So I wasn't sort of dark at the bottom and lighter at the top, like your classic sort of basic office wear. What I chose to do instead is to go for a sort of color scheme, basically. So a maroon trouser, a pink shirt, and I had red shoes, and that, quite a striking ensemble, but it was still a pair of trousers, a
Yeah,
shirt, and a pair of basically sneakers. So it's still completely me, but just a
yep.
slightly elevated version because it was appropriate for
The
the moment.
occasion.
It was, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
And I,
Um,
do you know, I think if I'd charged for how many Instagram messages I had for Kelly's event, which was, what do I wear, Lisa? I could have made, oh, listen, I'd have been going to, Australia next week
I'm sure, yeah.
because, but do you know, it's so interesting. Again, it's everybody, no matter what you're doing, your role or your an event that you're going to or whatever, the
Mm,
first thing that pops into your head is, what am I going to wear? Because
mm,
it's important not only how you feel as to how you portray yourself, because what you wear is the first thing that someone sees of you. You know, even I went to that event thinking, what am I going to wear? Because I'm going as me, I'm going to do a workshop, etc. My
exactly.
my daughter came with me that day and she's incredibly fashionable. She's petite, and she did all her own outfit and all that type of thing. The amount of comments that people were coming up to her saying, "Oh my goodness." She wasn't even with me at times. They were like, "Where did you get that outfit? How did you build that outfit?" But she made such an impression when people saw her. So that's what it's about. It's about saying you don't have to stick out like a sore thumb, but people notice what you wear, which is why listen, it's my job, but I personally believe not only does it make you feel good, but you can either attract people through your clothing, through the colors. I mean, you had that lovely pink shirt on, which is warm and it's welcoming. So, Pete, you drew people into you anyway. If you'd been up there in all black, it's a bit like, I'm structured, don't talk to me. But you used
Yeah.
color that allowed people to come into your world to listen to you.
Mm, mm. And that's really powerful if you can do that. I would say that's probably an unconscious choice, but I just like the combo and something
Mhm,
slightly different to sort of stand out a little bit from what I
mhm.
would normally wear. I mean, like I said, spent a long time working out what it was, because it wasn't just me up there. I was also representing my company as
Yeah,
RX. I
Yeah.
was representing the Ministry of Defence as part of the financial recognition scheme. And also, when people do look you up afterwards, they'll see that I'm connected with the choir that I am and the quartet that I am and all the other stuff that goes into what I do. So you're not, I think you're not ever just representing your own self. That's the most important core part of it. But you have to take into account both the other elements that you're representing and also the situation that you're going into. Like going into the Ministry of Defence from my work there, I will be slightly more formal, in fact,
Yep.
than I would be in my normal office job, because I feel there's a gravitas to that
Yeah.
feels appropriate, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas here, if I would literally wear this into my office at work because it's enough for formal to be the right mindset and make me feel like I'm at work, but it's not so formal that I think I'm overplaying it, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And your wedding dress.
Oh, yes.
Now, and the reason I say that is because we had this conversation. Your wedding dress, again, you
Mm,
go back. I want to bring this all kind of together now
okay.
from you, the authenticity piece, the visibility piece, everything. It wasn't just a standard wedding dress, was it?
It was not, no. In fact, I had two outfits because we did it in two parts. We did the legal version
Yep.
with just the basics for doing the actual legal part of it. And then the following week, we had a wedding party, which is where we exchanged rings and we had vows. So for the legal part of it, I was wearing a maroon velvet jumpsuit and my wife a navy velvet dress, and it was beautiful. And then for the actual wedding party, which is really my wedding dress, we were both in gold. So I had this sort of slightly silver side of gold dress that was not
Yep.
quite floor length, and I had gold pumps, sneakers, whatever you want to call them. And my wife was in this fantastic sort of Jessica Rabbit gold sequin number that was floor length as well. Honestly, it was fantastic. And it was about 3 or 4 weeks, I think, before, or a month before lockdown. So about 2 or 3 months into lockdown, when all of the poppies were out on the
Oh,
downs, we went up to the downs and also to the seafront and did a whole photo shoot using just a tripod and my camera. And I've got some great photos of us on the downs with all these poppies in front of us. It was great, but it was wonderful because why would I want to wear a white wedding dress? I'd done that for a civil partnership. It actually, although it sort of was me at the time, it didn't feel completely
mm,
right. Whereas wearing a gold dress in front of all of our friends, having
felt.
just a really good evening, felt absolutely perfect.
Yeah. And it's
And I,
really interesting listening to you, your face lights up. Your
mm,
face lit up, and then that's where for me the clothes evoke a memory,
mm,
and you can go back to the gold dress and the poppies, and it's
yeah,
just it is just wonderful, and I would love to finish the podcast on this kind of thought because I think that's wonderful. But before we do finish,
mhm,
I would love you just because obviously the bit that you're doing with the MOD and the
mhm,
financial recognition scheme,
yeah,
can you just finish me off on that bit with regards to what you're doing and just finalize that bit because if there is
mm,
anybody listening that it can make a difference to or they know somebody or whatever, they
yeah.
may not, I think it's just really important to finish on that bit, please, Emma.
Sure. So the two financial elements of the reparations that were suggested is the dismissed and discharge payment, which if you were literally dismissed or discharged under the ban, you can apply for that payment. And it's a £50,000 tax-free payment as recompense. So that's one team. That's not the area that I'm involved in. There is also a second impact payment that you can apply for, and it's between £1,000 and £20,000. So, as I was describing you earlier, somebody who feels that they can't be themselves, here's a little bit of, name calling or something like that, they would be in the lower end of that spectrum, right at the sort of bottom end. But the hard bit for us is that the top end of that spectrum, you're talking between 15 and £20,000. Somebody could have multiple elements that I described earlier, and we only have £20,000 as a maximum to be able to get to them. So our jobs basically are to read everything the veteran has put in their application, read everything that the Ministry of Defence has been able to find on them in their records. And between those things, we work on a reverse burden of proof. So if the veteran says something happened and there is nothing in the Ministry of Defence records to disprove that, then we believe it happened. And we have to then decide as a panel where on this scale this person sits, and that person then gets offered that amount. And we're over 500 cases in, and we have another, I don't know, probably 600 to go. And the scheme for applications closes on December the 12th this year. So I would appeal to anybody who's listening to this podcast, if you know of somebody who did serve between 1967 and 2000 under the ban for whatever length of time, and for whatever reason they came out of it, do encourage them to apply through the gov.uk website. If you search gov.uk LGBT veterans financial recognition scheme, it will come up. And there's an application form, and it will talk you through exactly what you need to do. But if you have anybody out there that knows of somebody who may fall into that category, or you are yourself somebody who would fall into that category, it's hard to put it through. Many people find it extremely difficult because they've basically spent anything between 36 and I don't know, 55, 60 years trying to forget what happened to them. So they have to open up this Pandora's box of trauma in order to be able to apply for a maximum of £20,000 on our side of the spectrum. So, but this money is there as a recognition that it was completely and utterly wrong what the Ministry of Defence and the various armed services did to us under that ban. And I, as I said, would encourage anybody to try and put their name forward for it, because it's there for you.
Yeah. Emma, thank you. You have been a wonderful guest. I mean, it is exactly what I hoped this podcast would be, which is we covered a little bit about the clothing, but I think you have an amazing story, and I just think you're a huge force to be reckoned with. And it was just, it was brilliant. So thank you so much for coming on my podcast. I'm going to obviously, I'll put all your details in the show notes
Mhm.
as well. If there is anybody there who, is struggling or whatever to find the link or whatever, they can always send you a message, can't they,
Yeah,
directly?
absolutely, on LinkedIn. That's
Um, but honestly, even go and watch Emma's Instagram, because you'll see her sing, which is fantastic. Honestly, I saw you doing your singing thing at the weekend, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I think you were stood behind, I can't remember which bit. I listened to it and I was like, oh, there's Emma. But the four of you were like, oh, you weren't like in a line. You were
okay. I wonder
almost,
which one it was that you
I don't know, I'm gonna
watched.
have to go and find it now and send it to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
But thank you.
there's no problem at all. Thank you specifically for giving me an opportunity to be visible. I think visibility is probably one of the biggest things, the biggest, most powerful thing you can be is simply visible. I know
Absolutely.
just me being visible as an openly gay woman on stage, as part of my choir, and also as part of an organizing committee for a contest that we do for the a cappella groups that we have. I know that that's had an effect on somebody, because I actually met somebody who 10 years later said, I was 13 or 14 and I went to this convention. I saw you up there as an openly gay woman in a position of responsibility, uh, just being allowed to be yourself and nobody questioning it. And at that time, she was questioning her own sexuality and really concerned that, she was going to be a lesbian and what that would mean and the rest of it. But she said she saw me there and felt actually would be okay, because look, there's somebody who is like me, basically, um, and she's respected and on stage, so it's going to be okay. And I only know that because she happened to um, start working in the same place as my wife at one point, and they got to talk about each other. So it was quite
My
interesting.
gosh. Oh
Yeah,
no, it's brilliant. Thank you so much for honestly coming on the podcast. So thank you to everyone who's listened. I hope you have thoroughly enjoyed that story. And yeah, it is unbelievably amazing. I'm kind of still lost for words listening to you because you did it to me at the panel, and I was a bit like, wow, what a story. So thank you so much, everybody. I will see you all next week. And have a lovely weekend. Thank you, Emma, so much. See you
bye
later.
bye now.
Bye.